Hey everybody, it's Red Kiwi here. Recently, in August 2018, I had the very lucky opportunity to attend Gores Climate Reality Training in Los Angeles with a wonderful group of people that you can see there at the top left. In fact, there were a couple of thousand people there. That was just our group from BC. And you can see the large size audience there on the right hand side with Al Gore speaking. Anyway, it was an amazing event, 3 days. We went through a lot of the content that Al Gore had for his movie, The Inconvenient Truth. We met a lot of leaders from around the world, including climate scientists, the mayor of Los Angeles, the chairman of Walt Disney, and a number of other leaders around the world to provide their insight and guidance on how we can solve this climate crisis. So what I wanted to do was just take you through some of the slides that Al Gore shared with us that articulates really what is the climate crisis that we're facing and what are some of the things that we can do to solve it today. So this is the first picture of Earth fully illuminated that any of us saw. It was taken on the last of the Apollo missions, and it really changed the way humanity thought about our connected home. There's really only 3 questions remaining about the climate crisis. Must we change? Can we change? And will we change? So when we think about must we change, the scientific community all around the world has been telling us for a long time that yes, we must change. And now Mother Nature is kicking in and telling us as well. So the sky is not a vast and limitless expanse the way that it appears to us as we stand on the ground and look up. In reality, there's just a thin shell of an atmosphere surrounding the planet. And we're putting 110 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into the atmosphere every day. That pollution, especially CO2, is building up and it's heating the planet. So let's go through the basic science of global warming. And this has been understood by scientists since the 1800s. So energy from the sun comes to the earth in the form of light. That energy is absorbed by the earth and warms it. Some of that energy is re-radiated from the earth in the form of heat. Some of that heat outgoing is trapped by that atmosphere. That's actually a good thing because it's kept our planet a stable temperature to sustain life as we know it. However, we're thickening that atmosphere by filling it with that heat-trapping pollution of CO2 and methane, etc. And what it's doing is it's causing the climate to change. So these are some of the biggest sources of those greenhouse gases. We've got coal mining, we've got industrial processes, agriculture, transportation. But the biggest forms of global warming is the burning of fossil fuels. And 80% of the world's energy, unfortunately, still comes from burning fossil fuels. We've seen a dramatic increase since World War II, and you can see in the last sort of 50 years or so that has significantly gone up. But in the last few years, we're starting to see it level off as the world adopts more clean energy solutions, which is really, really encouraging. If we look at the global surface temperature, and as a result of this pollution being trapped in the atmosphere, we're absolutely seeing global temperatures have risen dramatically in the since the 1970s, really, you can see on that chart. In fact, 16 of the 17 hottest years ever measured with instruments have occurred since 2001. The hottest year of all was 2016. On a global basis, more than 90% of the extra heat energy trapped by our atmosphere is going into the oceans. This heat makes ocean-based storms like hurricanes and typhoons and cyclones stronger and more destructive. This extra heat also disrupts the water cycle. The amount of water vapor that evaporates off the oceans increases as the oceans warm. That water vapor is carried over the land and often falls in much bigger precipitation events. When the land can't absorb all the water, that water falls in these larger storms and downpours. We see floods, mudslides, and heavy snow if that precipitation is forming in a cold climate. Extreme precipitation events have produced more rain and have become more common since the 1950s in many areas around the world, including much of the US. What you're seeing here is actually an event that they're starting to call a rain bomb, which drops enormous amounts of water in a storm. Extreme precipitation events lead to record flooding, which has been occurring all over the world, and here's one of those examples in India in 2015. Higher temperatures also have a direct effect on the incident and severity of wildfires. Here we can see that the number of large fires corresponds quite closely to years with higher average spring and summer temperatures. Today, the fire season in the western US, for example, is more than 100 days longer than it was in the 70s. In fact, here in BC, I think we had over 500 fires this season. And I remember hearing an article on CBC where the firemen said that there's good news and bad news. The good news is no more fires have been reported today. The bad news is that's because there's so much smoke we can't even see when new fires break out. So this is another example because we had record high temperatures here in BC this year as well. In 2016, this fire, as you can see here on the screen, in the heart of the Canadian tar sands up in Fort McMurray, destroyed large parts of the city and forced the evacuation of 100,000 people. The number of climate-related extreme weather events has been going up worldwide, according to the insurance industry. And in 2016 alone, these disasters caused losses totaling over $175 billion US. This glacier in southwest Greenland had almost completely melted by 2013 due to rising temperatures. NASA has precisely measured the decline in the mass of ice in both Greenland and Antarctica. All of this extra melting is rising sea levels worldwide. This flooding occurred in Miami Beach, Florida on a sunny day with no rain. High tides now regularly flood the streets of Miami Beach, as well as several other coastal cities around the world. The situation will only get worse as sea levels continue to rise. In fact, Al Gore was telling us that when he visited Miami, he actually saw fish swimming in the streets of Miami Beach. Miami actually is the number one city at risk in terms of assets for global warming, in terms of sea level rise. Looking at the city's risk by population, we can see that many huge cities in developing countries are very much in danger. If parts of these cities become inhabitable, where will those people go to live? So, must we change? I think the answer is conclusively a yes. But enough of the doom and gloom, if you will. Let's move to the positive things that we can do around can we change? And we do have the solutions at hand. Look at the example for renewable energy. Wind energy was predicted to provide 30 gigawatts of electricity worldwide by 2010. As of 2016, we had exceeded that prediction by 16 times. We see an exponential curve when we look at the amount of wind energy being built around the world. Wind energy actually could supply 40 times more electricity than the entire world currently uses. Solar energy is an even more dramatic story. 15 years ago, the best projection was that we would install 1 gigawatt of solar energy capacity by the year 2010. By 2010, we'd exceeded that goal by 17 times. And in 2016, we'd exceeded that goal by 75 times. The even better news is that we've seen a dramatic decrease, just like we've seen with computer chips, cell phones. Solar costs have fallen dramatically. In some regions, solar energy is less than half the cost of electricity from burning coal. In many countries where there's no universal electricity grid, we're seeing consumers and businesses leapfrog over old technologies and install solar panels in places that have long been denied access to electricity. This is life-changing, to just throw a solar panel on your roof and now all of a sudden you have light. Amazing. Chile is a true solar success story thanks to its policy decisions. This country's solar market took off slowly, but look at what's happening now. This is an amazing chart. There are many regions in the world where this type of growth and development are really possible. Every hour, the Earth gets enough energy from the sun to run the entire globe. If we can increase the fraction of that we harvest and use, we can make a lot of progress towards solving the climate crisis and helping local economies out at the same time. Battery storage is a really essential part of green energy revolution because batteries allow us to store excess solar or wind and use it during the times when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. Batteries are also critical for things like the electric vehicle market, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. As storage technologies get more and more efficient and cheaper, the market is growing quickly, like we can see here. These are all the automotive manufacturers that are now offering or in the preparations of offering electric vehicles, which is really huge because it really only like 5 or 6 years ago, it was really limited to 2 or 3, being things like Chevy, Nissan, Mitsubishi, Tesla, for example. And now we're seeing that number 10 times more. So I drew up a couple of charts that I wanted to share with you. So a lot of people are obviously very focused on how much it costs to operate their vehicle. Gasoline prices continue to skyrocket. So what I did is I took a couple of typical vehicles. There's a Nissan Leaf electric vehicle and a fairly comparable VW Golf. And what I did is I just sort of tracked how much would it cost to buy those vehicles, and then how much would it cost to run those vehicles over a relatively common period of time of 10 years. The thing to note is that an electric vehicle is a little bit more expensive to start off with, and that mainly has to do with the batteries. But as battery costs come down, we should see that delta close. The costs of operating an electric vehicle are very, very low compared to a gasoline vehicle, where you've got gasoline, oil changes, maintenance is much higher, etc. So the break-even point that we're starting to see is anywhere between 2 and 3 years. And then after that, you're really saving a lot of money. You're also seeing the cost of gasoline continuing to go up much, much more significantly year over year. So for these two vehicles, I priced it out that you could save about $36,000 in maintenance, oil changes, gasoline, fewer brakes because you use regenerative braking, so it actually uses the electric motor to slow you down instead of having to use your brakes. So there's some significant savings. The other question I get a lot of is, what are the types of vehicles out there? So these are some of the electric vehicles that are available in my case, British Columbia, but these are common vehicles that are available from around the world. Now, the average electric vehicle range now is around about 250 to 300, even more kilometers. And for those of you who are based in Vancouver or in BC, this map on the right-hand side will be relevant, but you can extrapolate that range for the region that you're in. But basically, the average daily driving is well within the range of electric vehicles today. In fact, the average daily drive is around about 40 to 50 kilometers. And when you start looking at this chart here, you can see that even the very low-end, cheaper models outrange the typical driving that you would need in a day. So what are some of the other things that you can do? So I built a bit of a list of some of the easy things that you can do to make a change and help fight climate change. So things like recycling and composting, instead of putting those in the garbage, is definitely a easy thing to do, and is something that many of us have been doing around the world for years. Wash your clothes in cold water. Reduce meat in your diet. So the actual manufacturing, if you will, of meat is a significant amount of energy compared to vegetables. So I'm not suggesting go vegan or go vegetarian, but even if you reduce the amount of meat in your diet, it will significantly play a role in reducing the amount of energy and carbon, and it'll save you a lot of money because meat is not cheap as well. Reusable bags, so take bags to the mall or to the grocery store when you're getting things. Plastic is significantly intensive to make, and of course it doesn't biodegrade, so it's not great when it sits in landfills or ends up in the ocean. One little trick that I would put out there is when you're in the grocery store and you're looking for a bag to put your apples in, or carrots, or loose vegetables or fruit, don't use the plastic bags that they often have nearby. Just go and hunt for those mushroom paper bags and use those instead. There's a lot of cities now that are actually banning the use of plastic straws. So maybe you can get glass ones that you can reuse at home, or just don't use straws. They're not really necessary. The other thing to consider is eating locally grown food. So see, when you're at the grocery store, see if you can source food that is from your country or even from your region, because it takes energy and gasoline potentially to ship those products to your grocery store. Staycations. So you can do a lot of really interesting and fun things around home instead of having to fly somewhere. Obviously, seeing the world is fantastic as well, but maybe consider that as an option sometimes. In terms of transportation, that is a significant area that we need to reduce. Maybe get your steps in and walk, or bike to the local corner store and get what you need. Consider taking public transit, especially if that public transit is electrified or is clean. Another thing, as we talked about earlier, is switch to LED lights, especially if your electricity source is dirty like coal. The other thing is, if you are at work and you're needing to meet with some people and you're looking at flying there, maybe consider a video conference in something like Skype instead of doing that flying, because flying does incur a significant amount of carbon. So if you want to take it to the next level, what are some of the other things that you could do? So if you're looking to replace your car, replace it with an electric vehicle, maybe a hydrogen fuel cell. The next best thing would be a plug-in hybrid, where you're running on battery and only using gasoline when your battery runs out. Or the next best thing after that would be using a hybrid. If you have an option in your region to switch to a renewable energy provider instead of coal, try that out. The other thing that you could consider is installing solar panels on your roof. Buy energy efficient appliances, especially for heating and cooling. And vote for a representative that believes that climate change is real and is a significant issue and has an action plan. Implement measures into your place of work. Maybe convince them to install solar panels or electric vehicle charging stations, or recycling and composting. So can we change? Absolutely, we can change. Now, will we change? So in December 2015, at the Paris climate negotiations, virtually every nation in the world agreed to phase out greenhouse gas pollution to net zero emissions as early as the second half of the century. In addition to actions by countries, it's more important than ever that we all take a lead on climate change personally. And we're seeing corporations, states, provinces, cities, individuals commit to taking action to reduce the emissions. Please join those who are speaking out and making choices to fight the climate crisis. Use your voice, use your vote, and use your choices in the marketplace and in your life, because your world depends on it. And we need your help. I appreciate the time. If you do have any questions, pop them in the comments. Once again, thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks.